I just realized something. So you saw me yesterday taking off the flywheel. First I had to take off the 6 bolts off the pressure plate, then ultimately take off the gland nut to remove the flywheel. And when I was removing those 6 bolts off the pressure plate, I realized that it was spinning, so I had to use the flywheel lock. The main reason why I pulled this engine was because I thought that it was seized. If it was seized, I wouldn't have had to use that flywheel lock. So why was that spinning? Got my 32mm socket here. Turns out I can actually spin it, no problem. So then that got me thinking, why was that not spinning when it was there? So I took a look at the starter motor, and the teeth are completely jacked up. I even tried to crank it with a key in the ignition, and technically this should be spinning because there's no flywheel even in the way, but as I try to crank it, it just clicks and nothing spins. So what I'm gonna do is go to AutoZone and pick up a brand new starter. Then I'm gonna try to see if I can start that engine up. If it starts right up, then I'm just gonna throw it back in there. If it doesn't start, I'll continue with the build. Just got the new starter. I also picked up some oil while I was there. So I'm gonna test this out and see if this fixes my problem. Taking a closer look at the starter, you can see the teeth are just completely messed up. At first I was thinking that maybe it got stuck when it tried to actuate and it just got caught on the flywheel. Whatever the case was, I still needed to take this out and replace it. Now that I'm down here, I was taking a look and this nut is actually loose. So I'm wondering if because this came loose or I forgot to tighten it from when I first took it apart, maybe this did just kind of like shake around and get misaligned with the teeth on the flywheel. So maybe that's the cause of it. So I'm still gonna take this out and I'm gonna compare it with the new one that I got from AutoZone. And then I'm gonna mount the new one on my spare transmission and see if I can get the motor started that way. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this installed on here. Actually, I'm gonna put this on that transmission just so I can see if I can spin the starter motor. When it does, it should. I don't see why it wouldn't. I'm gonna take it out, I'm gonna put it in there and then that on here. Okay, I got the engine pulled down from the engine stand. Again, I used my engine hoist there. I also mounted the transmission with the new starter there. I made sure to put the flywheel back in place and the clutch as well. And you just have to make sure you use the clutch centering tool. So now all that is ready. I just have to top off the oil and then I'm gonna see if I can do a bench test, get this started before throwing it back in there. So I'm gonna go and watch some Chris Vallone videos, see how we can wire this up so I can start it up, and I'll be back to get that going. So I've gathered here everything that I'm gonna need to do a bench start on this. So I have here this hose. Normally you're supposed to use a regular fuel line, but I don't have one laying around, so I'm just using this one. I still have to put my spark plugs in, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that with this 13/16 and an extension. You are gonna need a bit of wire with a female connection because we're gonna use this as a hot wire from the coil pack. Obviously your battery, some starter fluid there, and your jumper cables. And then obviously some gas. So I've already filled it up with oil. Now I'm gonna get started on hooking everything up right now. Alright, so we're pretty hooked up now here. So as you can see from the battery, I have the positive running to the main post on the starter and the negative running to the ground of the transmission here. The fuel line obviously goes over to the fuel tank there. This hot wire is what's going to give the ignition. So right now I'm not going to hook this up yet. I only want to crank the starter so that the motor turns and I build a little bit of both fuel pressure and oil pressure here. Now once I see the pressures running, then I'm going to go ahead and hook up the hot wire from the coil pack, and that should provide the spark in order for it to actually start up. So for the initial run, just to get the pressure going, I'm not going to spray any starting fluid just yet. I'm only going to spray that when I'm ready to actually fire it up. And the last thing I have here connected is the starter button here. One just goes to the negative terminal on the starter, and the other one goes to the power post here on the starter. So right now, if I crank this, it should start to kick it on. After spending about an hour trying to figure out why the starter motor was not turning over the engine as smooth as it should, I think it's because the batteries just did not have enough juice. This battery has just been sitting here for about a month or two, so it's probably drained out. Right now I have it charging on a trickle charger. In the meantime, I have it plugged into my truck there and the truck is running. That way for sure we know that the battery source is not going to be the problem. I also did remove all spark plugs from all 4 cylinders just to release pressure from all 4 cylinders as it's trying to compress the pistons. The other thing is that this engine has been sitting here with no oil for about a month. So I'm thinking maybe the piston rings are just a little bit more stuck onto the cylinders. So I wanted to get the motor running just to get the cylinders all lubricated properly. So let's crank her up. And as I crank it, I can see the fuel start to fill up this tube here, which means there is fuel pressure, so that's a good sign. One thing I did notice is that when I try to crank this, I'm supposed to be seeing some kind of spark jumping from each terminal and each spark plug. And it's the same for all 4 of them. Now I'm wondering if I may have damaged that coil pack. I actually made the mistake of putting this hot wire onto the wrong post here in the negative terminal. I tried to crank it a couple times and did not work, obviously. Then I immediately realized that this was on the wrong post, so I took it out and I moved it over, and I've been trying ever since. Now I'm wondering if I've actually fried this unit. I even have the spare coil pack here, but I'm pretty sure this is toast. I tried it, obviously it didn't work, so I went back to that. So I'm worried that I may have damaged this, either this or my electric ignition in there. So it's a toss-up for now. So unfortunately I don't think I'm going to be able to get this started today. Now I have to do some research to see if I've damaged maybe some of the spark components in there. So we'll hold off on getting this bench started for now.